Welcome to Linear Fisheries. We're here on Brasenose 1 because there are 2,500 carp in this lake. And I got here this morning. Loz next to me was already set up. It's that sort of lake that suits him perfectly. It's not my sort of place anymore. I'm getting a bit old for all this, but he's been working his arse off the whole way through and has got nothing to show for it at the moment. I've been fishing Zigs for probably about 7 hours now. Anything between 2 foot under the surface and just under the surface, because when we sent the drone up earlier on, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of fish out in the middle just sitting on the surface. And I've tried spodding over Zigs, I've blended up the sweetcorn that I've got with me, and I've had different colours on at different depths, bit of yellow, bit of black, bit of brown, and nothing's actually happened so far. So I've literally just put the 3 bottom bait rigs out now. What I'm doing is I'm spodding over the same area that I'm fishing on the bottom. I'm baiting up with just corn. I haven't brought a single boilie with me, and hopefully anything that they don't eat on the way down ends up making the spot sort of active for later on. And now it's overcast, you know, the heat's dropped out the day. We're not seeing fish on the surface like we were. Hopefully these bottom bait rods will start to go, but this session is all about effort, and Loz is the man to show you how to do it. It suits him down to the ground. I'm sure he'll be getting a few bites, and over the next few days we'll be able to show you all the little tips and tricks to get bites on this highly pressured but highly stocked venue.
I've fished linear sort of probably 3, 4, maybe a handful of times over the last 4 to 5 years. You know, 2.5 hours away, I live right back up north. But I've had decent hits every time I've come. I've fished Oxleys, B1, B2. I like the aspect that there's a lot of fish in here. You know, it's about getting bites. We all come fishing to get bites. So ringing the changes, changing methods, changing tactics, spodding long range. I mean, this complex has literally got everything for you.
I've chosen to fish in linear because this is modern day carp fishing. This is what lots of people have to deal with. They haven't got time to wait to get into a syndicate. You know, they perhaps haven't researched into local clubs and that sort of thing. And it's a bit of a Mecca really, you know, for catching big uns. There's so many fish in here, so much bait goes in. It's, you know, it's now generating loads of 30s and 40s. I can understand why people travel to come here.
I'm currently fishing Zigs up in the water, so I've got 3 Zigs on my spot at the minute. I'm spodding every 5 minutes. I'm setting the timer on my phone to literally 5 minutes, you know, it's literally that precise. You know, what I want to do is keep that cloud going through the water. You know, you get a nice cloud up there. If you imagine you leave it 10, 15 minutes, all of a sudden the cloud's gone. If there's any fish in the area, you know, the attraction's gone then. You know, you need to keep that consistent, you know, nice cloudy mix falling through the water, hopefully bringing the fish into your area, you know, and that's going to be the key to getting bites, you know, on a consistent basis.
So I've chosen to fish at 26 rod lengths, basically that because that's where Loz is fishing. And out there it's 12.5, 13 foot deep and just lovely and glassy on the bottom. I've cast out with a marker lead first of all, just to feel what the bottom was like. No marker float on at all. And it's just a case of picking a range that you're comfortable with. The fish live down the middle strip a lot of the time, and just having the lead on allows you to feel that much more. And then once I've done that, basically put the marker float back on. I've got a big loop on the end of the line, so I'm able to just loop to loop the lead off, loop to loop the marker on, put that out and just use that as a target for the spod at the start of the session. And then once the spod's clipped up at the right range, you don't need the float out again. I've got all 3 rods within a really big tree dead ahead of me. I'm trying to keep everything really, really tight, and that's the key on these places, not to plough the fields and scatter, as we say. You know, you want everything landing on the money every single time when you're drawing the fish in. The bait is the feature. The reason I'm not using boilies is just because corn is so successful on this lake. You know, they've seen everything here. You know, there's no real tench or bream to speak of. It's just only carp in here. There's not tons and tons of silverfish as well. So you can get away with fishing just corn without getting bothered with little tiny plastic hook baits. I've got 1 grain of maize, which I cooked up separately, and 1 piece of pop-up plastic corn, different colours, different flavours, all fished on exactly the same range, 26 rod lengths. The spod is clipped up at sort of 25.5, because as the lead hits the clip, it swings back towards me like a pendulum and lands that little bit closer towards me. So it's really important you know, in that sort of depth of water, 12, 13, 14 foot, that you clip up about half a rod length short, and accuracy is the key. But I'm going to put a few more out, just ring the dinner bell as we say, and with this change in the weather, it getting a bit cooler, you know, we've noticed on the drone footage that the fish have sort of disappeared off the surface or are a bit lower down, and hopefully that signifies the start of feeding on the bottom. Nice.
What are you doing?
Sorry? I'm playing with maggots. There's no else to do. Ah, then Margaret, are you going to go and tell everybody out there, or your little friends, that we're desperate for a fish? Just go and tell them, or your little mother and father and dads and... Oh, fish. Straight over the spot. Margaret has produced a bosher. Well, I've decided to switch over to a bunch of maggots as a hook bait. This particular lake over the years has seen a lot of them, and the fish are naturally attracted to them. I need a bite. This one's going to get me out of jail, hopefully. Well, the session so far, I'd be lying if I said everything was going according to plan, you know. I think I've probably had the only bite that's happened around the lake today. Unfortunately, I lost it. You know, we've had high pressure. It's been baking hot. The fish are up in the surface layers. They're down one half of the lake, you know, and very little's been happening. With that said, you know, the rain's coming now. As you can see, it's looking absolutely prime for a bite. I'm just hoping these conditions kind of swing things in our favour. We've made a few little tweaks to what we're doing. Yeah, and hopefully the next time you see us, we'll have a carp to show you.
My first bite came over the bed of corn a couple of hours before first light. Night takes are always a shock to the system, but when it's fishing tricky, they're all welcome.
Oh, he's got him. Yes, come on. Oh, it's always good to get the first one. Yeah, man. All good.
It's bang on 21, mate.
21, beautiful. The first of many, hopefully. Cheers, brother. And there he is. My first brazen nose carp for about 10 years. Just thinking back, the last time I was here was with Jake Wildboar and doing some filming as well. And a lot has changed. The fish have got much bigger. They're definitely more moody. Well, they certainly are at the moment. But this one came on the baited spot, 26 rod lengths, on a little tiny bit of maize, tipped off with a bit of plastic corn and a little tiny stick, and it absolutely roared off in the night. I was expecting more bites, but none have come, but I've just refreshed all the rods, put more bait out, and I'm told by Loz that daytime is the time, so hopefully we'll get more. But for now, I'm really pleased to be off the mark. It's always nice to get off the mark, especially when you've not been somewhere for a long time. You know, we know this place can be absolutely mental at times, and all three rods are going off and people have hits of 20, 30 fish in a session. But you have to take it into context. We've not seen another bite on the lake while we've been here. There might have been one in the dark last night further up the lake, but you know, so that makes one bite and a result at the moment. Of course, I want to build on that. We came here to get loads of bites. If the fish play ball, I'm sure that will start happening. But for now, yeah, it's nice to be off the mark. There you go, brother.
Thank you very much, mate.
I'm guessing that you were expecting more action than we've had so far by now.
I thought we'd have had a few more bites. Obviously I can only go off, we had a bit of a testing session last week as well, so that was a little bit slow. Especially
Didn't you say that it took 24 hours for you to get your first take?
Yeah, so
Right.
it took a little bit of time, which, we're only hitting 24 hours now ourselves, so
Yeah.
it could all change. When we turned up yesterday, it was high pressure, the sun was out,
Flat calm.
It was just the worst conditions we could have had or expected. So
Yeah.
it's nothing we're doing. I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, where you've been and what you've caught, but if the fish aren't having it and you're fishing confidently and effectively, you can't do anything about that. We can't make them feed, and naturally, unless you're spodding over zigs and creating that cloud, getting bait falling through the water, and then they are feeding on what you're putting in, and you're getting takes. If you're putting a single zig out there, they're either one, taking it because they're inquisitive, or two, they're taking it out of aggression because it's in the line of fire.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've not seen another bite yet. And I'm not big up in the fact that I've had a take, because that's nothing to write home about on this lake at all. But it's not exactly rocking, is it, at the moment for anybody?
By a long stretch.
Loads of people must come here in this situation and try and it doesn't happen. What's your best bit of advice in this situation? What should we be doing now?
Keep going. You're not doing anything wrong, like us at the minute. We're not doing anything wrong. It's just all down to the fish and when they want to feed.
Right.
It'd be quite easy in these sort of situations. I've done it myself in the past, where you start changing, you change over to rigs that you're not confident in, baits you haven't caught on before.
Yeah.
And realistically, it's not nothing you're doing because the tactics will work. It's just when they want to feed, they'll feed, and when they don't, you're trying to scratch around, and try and nick bites everywhere. So keep working the swims, the shoal fishing here. We've seen them on the drone yesterday. When they're in shoals, 50, 60, hundreds of fish at a time. So you can clearly see when you put a big bed of bait down, you'll nick 4 or 5 fish on it when they're on it, and it'll go dead. And
the whole shoal has moved away.
That might be a couple of hours after spodding,
Yeah.
So literally you're spending all that time into your swim, they come in within 10 minutes, you get 4 or 5 bites and they're gone, they've ate it.
Yeah.
It's done, simple as that. So when people turn up here with a tenner's worth of bait and expect to catch £1,000 worth of fish, unless it's on zigs and a bit of foam, it just isn't going to happen, So just keep going, keep working your swims, because eventually...
So do you mean not necessarily recasting the rods, but rebaiting?
It's the bait that's the key. If you feel you should have had a bite or you've had a couple of indications that you think, maybe I might have been done, because that's the case, then redo your rods. There's no harm.
But if you haven't had any bleeps...
No, just leave it and keep the bait going in.
Just keep the bait going in until you start getting takes.
It's the sound of the spawn, they've seen it that many and heard it that many times that they're naturally now they're thinking the dinner bell.
Right.
I know that's a much used phrase in carp fishing, but it literally is the dinner bell. We've seen it yesterday. When that spawn's going in, there's fish going in and out of that cloud all the time. I think if you've got something that's falling through that water column on a consistent basis, eventually it's going to leave a little bit of a trail going down to your bait.
Do you think it's possible to put too much in though?
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to be careful in how frequently you respom and how much you put out. So what would your best bit of advice when it's slow like this and you're waiting for your first take? How many spombs would you put out and how often would you do it?
I'd put a couple out every hour or so. Maybe
just 2 spombs.
Just 2 spombs. That's it. Like I said, you only want that. You're not doing it to feed them. You want in sort of a trail leading down through the water column where the fish are swimming up through the water. They've only got to catch a piece of coral falling down out the corner of the eye, bright and visual, and they're following it down.
First one goes down, then there's 50 down there.
And and I know there can be 100 fish out of your spot now, but it only takes one of them to start feeding, and it induces the rest to feed. They start clouding it up. So that's what you're looking for. Like I said, it's just keeping that bait consistently falling through the water, not putting too much in. It might be. I've got some of the zig and soup mix in my spod mix at the minute. All that's there to do is create that cloud.
It's not to feed them.
It's not to feed them. It's literally to say, look, here's where the bait is. When you want it, come and get it.
Right.
That's all it is. If you start putting 5, 10 spods out every half an hour, which again, I've been criminal of myself before, unless you're consistently spodding over zigs, in which you're only using the super cloud anyway, so it's not a problem. But if you're fishing on the bottom, feed to your bites. Get a nice little bit, maybe start with 10 or 15, 20 spombs to start with, get some bait down there, but then feed to your bites, and if you're getting consistent action, you put more bait in. If you're not, just keep a little bit trickling through until you start getting those bites. And that will be, that's what I'm doing at the minute, so we'll see what happens. Well, we've had a move of swim. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that the fish are down this end of the lake, the backs are out the water, big vortexes everywhere. Doesn't look like the fish have moved at this moment in time, so I decided to chuck a couple of zigs in amongst them and try and nick that all-important first bite. And if the fish continue to stay down here, I might even move down here for the night ahead. Fingers crossed. Well, we are now spotting over zigs. It's evident that the fish are high up in the water column, backs everywhere. We've tried single zigs for a couple of hours with no joy, only a couple of liners for our effort. So I figured the only way with them being up there to get them interested at all is by putting a cloud over the top of the zigs, try and entice them and get them interested in it, and hopefully a change in tactic will bring us a first bite. So the mix that I'm using is the mainline Zig soup, literally straight out the packet. And all I've done with that is literally add water to it, make a nice sloppy mix. You want that cloud lasting. Very little food content there for them, so that when they come into the cloud, the only thing there for them to eat is your zig, and hopefully that's going to be the key to getting a bite.
Fishing with loz is exhausting. It's always inspiring to fish with people that are very aggressive in their fishing, very driven, and you know, it's like fishing with Daryl. It makes you fish harder because you're trying to catch up. You know, there's no slouching allowed over the next few days. So yeah, it's always good to fish with people you don't fish with a lot, because you see new things that they're doing, little tricks that he's doing, gluing the maggots on the top of a zig, things like that. I'm going to add that to my armoury. So, you know, you can't fail to learn from people that are as dedicated as Loz is. Just into dark, the first rod was away off the baited spot. The trick is to try and guide it away from the other lines, so only one rod has to be recast.
It's the right hand side.
It's gone over the other two lines. It's right over there now. Let's go back round the other side of the rods.
Waders are essential on B1 because of the shallow margins, and with Loz already fully rubbered up, he took charge of the netting.
It's in that net. Oh, got him! Boom!
20 pounder, mate.
Wicked. It's a carp, mate. That's all that matters.
You managed to save me sock, but camera crew have kicked it in, and now I've just dripped it into my trainer while I'm showing you. Happy days. Who cares? We've caught a carp.
There's a 30.
Is it?
Yeah. £30.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Get in.
£30 full.
Wicked. My biggest brazen-nosed carp ever. Touch. Cheers, brother.
Well done, mate.
I'm well chuffed with that. Yeah, man.
Wow, look at the scales.
He's awesome.
That is nice. It is a looker, he is, mate.
Check that out.
Yeah. We did need that.
We did need it, mate, yeah.
Confidence boost.
Yeah, and after that, getting a funny occurrence on that rod as well, getting it back out their first cast, which was a fluke, just before it got dark, and then there we go. It's really, really nice to get one early. It's not ideal to have night bites all the way through, but if that's the way the fish want to play it, then that's what we have to do. I don't even know how many 30-pounders there are in here. I don't think anybody does, to be honest, because there's so many. But it's my biggest brazen-nosed fish by a long way. Obviously I've not fished it for a lot of years and they've grown a lot. Yeah, it's a top result. Get a 30-pound English fish on any lake is a top result, and hopefully it's the shape of things to come.
That way! That way! Stupid carp.
Oh, hello. That's how many fish in my swim. The next fish powered off well left, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. Proper pulling, this fish.
You'll feel it grating or something.
With Loz fishing so close, the angry carp had picked up at least one of his bowstring tight lines, so he had no choice but to slacken off and allow me to net the fish.
All three of them? Oh no.
Fortunately for me, the big mirror wallowed straight into the net, and I then set about untangling the carnage. To his credit, Loz took it very well and got his rods back out fishing in record time. I always rebait before casting the fresh rig onto the spot to hopefully scare any fish away with the corn instead of the rig. As is often the case at Linear, the next bite came very soon after 6 more medium spombs rained corn down onto the spot. The next fish did exactly the same as the first and kited well left, taking out Loz's lines again. I always feel so guilty when wiping out my neighbour's lines, especially twice in a night, and the next day we definitely needed to have a rethink on how to solve this problem for the night to come. Well, check that out. You can't see it, but this fish is absolutely rock solid. 34 pounds, obviously a male. Led me a merry dance towards the end of last night. Unfortunately wiped out Loz's rods. Just kited left, there was nothing I could do about it. And ended up coming back in with 2 of his lines tangled round it. But the hook hold was solid and in the net he went. And just proof really, just sticking with a plan, staying at 26 rod lengths, keep putting the corn in, and the fish have turned up on it. We weren't expecting night bites at all. Normally this is a day lake, and I think just because of the weather we're having, you know, we're getting all the action is coming at night. And after having a 30 pounder early on in the night, to get this one late in the night, plus a 20 pounder as well, which did the same thing unfortunately, wiped out Loz's rods. And we're going to have a rethink on that one. We're fishing pretty close together. It's just the nature of the fishing over here, and I think what I'm going to do is start dumping the lead to bring the fish up in the water. Loz is going to slacken his lines off because they're so tight out there. The fish is going over the top of them, and as I'm dragging it back towards me, it's picking them up. So he's going to slacken off. I'm going to dump the lead, and hopefully tonight we shouldn't get into any problems. Thank you, my darling. Before I recast, I thought I'd go through the all-important rig with you, and it's basically a combi rig. When you're fishing over very light bait, like the corn is, you want something that moves very easily into the fish's mouth. If it's very restrictive, so it's a very, very stiff hook link, then the fish can be sucking at the corn and the hook bait just doesn't go in. So this combi rig is basically made up of the boom material and also then a braided end. So the boom is really easy to make. I've just crimped it at either end. So basically they're double barrel crimps. This is the 0.6mm crimp, the smaller one of the two. Just go through one barrel, round to make a loop, through the other barrel, and then put it into the jaws of the crimp. And it's really important that the round bits of the crimp fit into the little U in the jaws. You don't crimp them flat, you crimp them so you squeeze them to keep them the same shape they are, just compressed down. So literally just put them into the jaws of the crimp, make sure they're all lined up, squeeze it down, and that's ready. And I basically test that, you know, by pulling it really, really tightly before I cast it out. But if you crimp it correctly, you'll easily get 25 to 30 pound breaking strain out of this 25 pound material. So I've got a large loop at the lead end, and that makes it easier for me to clip it on and off of this quick change swivel. And then at the other end, I've got another crimp, but there's a much smaller loop. So again, through one barrel, round, through the other barrel, pull it down so you've got a nice small loop, crimp it down, and then cut off the tag ends nice and neatly. And that little tiny loop is what I'm loop to loop in the hook section on, so the braided hook section. And a combi rig basically is a combination of materials. So it used to be mono and a soft braid. This is a stiffer mono, so I'm using a stiffer braid. This is armour cord that you'd normally use on the spod rod. Very, very thin, very durable, and slightly stiffer. And I noticed by testing this rig again and again when I first started using it, if I used a soft braid like Supernatural, the hook element always folded back up the hook link. because it was so soft. As it came to rest on the lake bed, it always folded back. But by having a stiffer braid on like this armour cord, it always sits out nice and straight, and I think that helps it to turn and catch hold in the fish's mouth that little bit faster. So making the hook section, it's a little bit tricky, and you need to be able to do the whipping knot to do it. So basically I fold over the armour cord so it's about 6 inches long when it's folded over. I pass it through the eye of the hook, so a little tiny loop about 1/4 of an inch long is sticking out the eye of the hook, and then I tie my favourite whipping knot. So I do a big loop underneath the hook, and then with both bits of line I wrap up once going up the hook and then cross over and go down, and I literally 2 or 3 more turns and that's enough. You end up with 2 tag ends. Pull those really tight, move it down onto the hook and pull it tight again. And those 2 tag ends then, there's only one is needed. So I basically cut one off. There's no way the knot can loosen or undo or anything like that. So you end up with 1 tag end that forms your hair. So then I put a little tiny rig ring onto the hook, go through the rig ring with that hair, back on itself, and then back on itself again and pull it up tight, and that just locks it in position. And you can see there I want it coming off the hook sort of around where the barb is. That's really important to help the hook turn over and catch hold. And the other thing that helps it turn over is the kicker. So that's slid on after I've done the loop, and this is a medium-sized brown kicker, a nice angle, sort of bending the eye inwards, and as the hook link is tightened it flips over and catches in the bottom lip. And then the hook, this is one of the Kamakuras. So the, how can we put it? The commercially sharpened hook that is down to an absolutely super fine needle point. I'm sure they convert a lot more pickups into bites, and every fish on here has been absolutely nailed on them. This is a size 4 wide gape, just a big hook with a small bait, but that doesn't matter because I've got some buoyancy to the bait. So the bait is a little bit of maize that I've literally just soaked overnight, brought to the boil for about ½ an hour, and that forms the counterbalance underneath the piece of plastic corn. And this is the banoffee. I love the white colour, and it's the pop-up. So with that little bit of sinking maize, it just about sort of lifts up off the bottom. It's not a pop-up, the hook's not sinking slowly, hook's laying flat, but the bait is just that little bit more visible amongst all that corn. You imagine a huge bed of corn out there and one little fleck of white. Often you can get bites faster on an opposing colour rather than matching it. And the 2 that have really worked for me on this session, I've used the yellow corn but soaked in the garlic goo, in the garlic supreme, which is really, really stinky, turns it a sort of orangey colour, and then I've been soaking the maize underneath in the garlic as well, and that goes proper orange. And that one or this one, this banoffee, have both worked brilliantly over those large beds of corn. And changing the hook link couldn't be simpler. The boom stays on there the whole time. You know, that would take 20, 30, 40 fish before I changed it. The end section I'm changing all the time because the hook's going blunt. Even when I'm winding in across the gravel, that hook point is so fine. I'm dinking the point of the hook sometimes and then just changing it over. So I've got loads of these little loop sections with the hooks already tied on. The hair's not tied. I tie that at the end because obviously if I don't need them on this session and I want a longer hair because I'm boilie fishing, I'd use exactly the same setup and just tie a longer hair. So loads of those are tied in advance. I just cut the old one off and then just loop to loop this one on, and you're ready to go again. And then the all-important lead system, I've been using running rigs on this session. So if I pull against this, that swivel pulls out of the lead clip really easily. What I've done is I've just squeezed the eye of the swivel slightly so it doesn't click into the lead clip properly, and that's done on purpose so that when the fish picks the bait up, shakes its head, the swivel pulls out, the fish has got no anchor point, and the takes I've been getting have been absolute steamers. So that's a really good little tip if it's not weedy, which it's not here, and you can fish a running rig. I would fish a running rig. A lead clip is super duper anti-tangle. Obviously you can change the weight of the lead really easily. I'll finish it off with a rubber connector and some of the green dark matter tube. For me that's really, really important with this rig to stop any tangles. If I pull that back in together like that, it just about clicks in now. But you've got a pivot point formed by that loop. Yeah, there's no way it can get off of that quick change swivel that's inside there, so it's really easy to change. When I'm sliding my PVA sticks down that, literally I'm just pulling it out of there, unclipping it, sliding the stick down, clipping it back on, you know, because at that sort of range, over 100 yards, you know, sometimes you do get it wrong, you need to wind in, put another stick on and get it out there quickly. So if you're fishing over any kind of particle mix, not just corn, you know, whether it's hemp and corn, hemp on its own, a mixture of different particles, I recommend you use a combi rig with a nice light hook bait like that so it lifts up into the mouth and snares them really quickly.
Right, I've decided the move's on the cards. It's evident that there's a lot of fish down that side of the lake, literally to Dan's right. We've moved down there a couple of times during the session already for a few hours at a time, just chucked zigs out there. We haven't had nothing, but it is evident that the majority of fish that I've been seeing are down that end of the lake. So it makes sense why nothing's happening here to make a move. Hopefully we'll be on a few more fish. You know, this morning I've been up since 6:30 spotting never zigs. It's been clear skies, high pressure, scream zigs all day long and absolutely nothing's happened. The only ones I've seen boshing are down that end of the lake. So without further ado, I'm going to make the dreaded move and hopefully it pays off later. Right, so we've had a change of swim and I've decided to go with a change of tactic. It's the last night of the session and we really do need a fish, so I don't think it's any coincidence and any shock to anybody that over the years naturals have really produced big hits of fish on this lake. You're not allowed to spod maggots anymore, although like this session we've been using them in bags and as hook baits, but however you are allowed to spod worms, and I'm not talking a handful here and there, I'm talking in kilos. Now you might be thinking it's expensive, and yeah, if you get them at the right price, probably £15 a kilo is expensive, but when you compare it to boilies, you might be paying £13 or £14 a kilo for boilies. And these, in my opinion, on this particular venue, have a more devastating effect than boilies will. So this is what I'm going to go in with for the last night of the session. Hopefully it's going to get me a fish or two. I actually did a practice session a few weeks ago on here with this, and you know, I had 16 fish in the same time that we've done now, so it's definitely had an impact on that session. I'm hoping it does the same for me tonight. I'm going to talk you through the rig I've been using on this session now. For all intents and purposes, it's a standard combi rig, but each component serves a specific purpose. So starting from the important end, which is the hook bait, I've got a trimmed down cell cork dust wafter. I've tipped off with a piece of slow sinking corn, and that'll just balance that rig out, just so the corn's sitting nice and proud. Moving to the hook, I've got a size 4 curve shank, which is my chosen hook pattern wherever I go. I just use the drag file just to sharpen it. You know, some big fish in here, and when it goes in, I want it to stay in. On there I've got a nice little bit of silicone tubing. Again, all that's doing is trapping the hair in place when I'm chucking single hook baits at long distances. It just makes sure that the hair can't get wrapped around anything, and also I'm not going to use any PVA tape to tie it back. I've just got a small piece of shrink tube just to cover the eye of the hook. All that's here for is to help the hook turn more aggressively in the fish's mouth. I've got maybe a couple of mil of supple braid. All that is the camo material, the £20 camo. I've just stripped the coating off and it's just a normal nice braid underneath there. I've got the Albright knot covered up with a small piece of dark matter putty. That's just to ensure everything's kept nice and tight to the deck. The boom section itself is £20 IQ material. Now that's stiff enough that when in cast, you know, you've got that nice anti-tangle properties, so I know that chucking this without any foam on or PVA bag, it's not tangled in flight. You know, and I've made literally hundreds of casts this session, not one of them has come back tangled. And obviously with it being fluorocarbon, you know, it's going to be hard for the fish to see. With that said, because I'm not using any putty or a sinker in the middle of this hook link, I've got an anti-tangle sleeve on there, and it's one of the dark matter ones, so it's heavy to make sure everything's pinned down to the lake bed should the rig fall in any debris. I've then got a simple overhand knot that's going to allow me to attach this to my quick chain swivel on my leg clip, and away I go. And the last thing I do just before casting out is add a small squirt of the sherbet go around the piece of corn, and hopefully this will get me a bite or two tonight.
Oh, there's one on this rod as well.
Joking?
Yeah, joking, yeah.
You know what, I've waited 2 days for this. Oh mate, it's not me that sucked it, it sucked something else.
Just to rub salt in the wound, Loz had picked up a fish trading line. This is an occupational hazard on busy waters like B1, and when it happens, the priority is always to free the fish from the hook and the line that is dragging around. as we've said, this is not Lozzy's fish. It was basically hooked on another rig that was trading loads of line, sticks and everything else, probably somebody else's line as well. So the best bit of all is the fish is now away from the hook and he's free to swim away. But the hook's been in there quite a while. It's gone very red around the mouth there, so I'm just going to apply a little bit of this carp care, this propolis. Basically it goes off when it gets wet. It's antiseptic, antibacterial, and that's going to help the skin there just to heal. And then the scales come off there as well in all of that commotion. So again, just a little bit of water onto it, and the water just basically makes it go off, go hard, and that will stay on the fish now even when we put him back. So it's a major pain for Loz. He's sorting his rods out now while I do this, so he can get back on the money again. But the most important thing is this fella is free to go. There you go. Away. Carp gods have got to be smiling on us now.
We'll try again.
Go, brother.
My hero.
Get that down, you son. Oh, glass of red wine as well. I think we deserve this.
Yeah.
Right, I've never seen anybody work as hard as you have worked over the last 3 days.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment.
No, mate, it is. It is. I wouldn't have put that much effort in, and you know, and to no avail as well. Do you know what I mean? It must be grating a bit now. Come on.
It's great. Yeah, the trouble is, if you start letting negativity get through to you, you'll just finish completely.
Yeah.
So at the minute I'm trying to keep it on the back burner and say I've got one more night, anything could happen. when we wind in, that'll be it. That'll be the point I'll give up.
But you've altered things today. There was a nasty rumour while I was asleep earlier on that you went and got some worms, and obviously you've moved the other side of me, and we have to say thank you to the people at Linear because they've given us 4 swims to fish between the two of us. So we've had the room to manoeuvre, and you've been able to leapfrog backwards and forwards. So first of all, why have you moved this side?
The main reason is the majority of the fish that we've been seeing since we've been here have been sort of from your left hand side down to this end.
Yep.
I think maybe there was a few in front of me at the odd times. Obviously I've come down here a couple of times.
Yeah. Because a bulk of fish has ended up out there.
It's just been ridiculous.
Right.
So, you know, all right, I lost one on a Zig the first time I tried it. Nothing else since, but it just made sense for the last night that, you know, I've done a few nights up there and nothing's happened. Now I've got the worms. What I didn't want to do is cross-contaminate with all the bait I've put in the main area. Right. And I wanted to come in here and start fresh. Right. So that was the only thing down there at the time, to see whether it does actually really make a difference. Really. Right. So
obviously we know the sort of the backstory of the worms and how well it's done in the matches and everything else on here. Yep. But for the people that don't know, explain to me what they are, what the process is of using them, you know, and why you think they make a difference.
Okay, so obviously worms are a natural. Yeah. And this particular complex over the years has been dominated by natural baits, maggots, casters. Yeah. Hence now the maggots being banned for spodding. You are allowed to still use them, just not spodding. But I think because of how well there was and the amount of success people were getting, somebody then decided to try the worms as sort of a, you know, another alternative, and has just had it off, you know. Yeah.
So how do you get them? Like, where do you get them from, and what's the process of actually using them?
You can get them from any tackle shop. Right. Ideally, for the quantities you want, it's no good bringing a little tiny pot and expecting bites and bites and bites. It's got to be done properly in kilos. It's expensive, but the way you got to look at it, what do you want out your session? Yeah. You know, because at the minute, like you said, it's difficult, but if it turns it tonight into a decent session, is it worth that money? Yeah, yeah. So, you know, alternatively, you can go to a maggot farm. Again, pre-order it from there. But
get the worm from a maggot farm?
Yeah, get a worm from a maggot farm or a wormery. Right. Loads of people. There's loads of different alternatives you can do to try and get the cheapest price. Right, okay. But for me, I just go to a local tackle shop, get them to pre-order them in advance, a week in advance, and they're there for me. Right. All
so
nice.
How do they come and what do you do with them?
So they come in kilo bags.
Right.
So at the start of my session or when I start using them, I'll get the bag, cut it open, and ideally what I'd like to do is riddle the soil away to start with, so we're just left with the worms. Because what you don't want to do is be putting whole worms out there.
Right.
You know, one, it's not cost effective. Two, they'll be riddling all over the place away from your spot.
Yep.
So I want to chop them up as much as humanly possible.
Right.
Tiny little pieces falling through the water column.
Right,
and obviously
okay.
the amino acids are then leaving a trail as well for the carp to find.
Right.
But also you still want the soil.
Right.
Now when you get the worms, some of the soil will be nice, ground, fine, you know what I mean, look lovely.
Yeah.
And then you'll get big bits in it. And again, by riddling them, you can take those bits away.
Right.
And at the end, you'll be left with loads of little tiny pieces of worm with a nice found, almost like a ground bait, which you can add some liquid to or water to bulk up. And then you've got that nice cloudy aroma going through the water with the worms as well.
And how much do you put in as an opening gambit then? How much have you put in this afternoon?
1.5 kilos, 2 kilos. Again, if it's going to work and you want the best out of it to maximise it, you need to get some down there.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? You've got to have a carpet there to start with.
Right, okay.
You know, once you start eating them, it's very, very difficult to get them off you.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So if the fish come on me tonight, I'll suspect if I get a bite, I'll get 2, 3 or 4.
Right, okay.
Because they'll hold them and they'll keep wanting them.
Right.
You know, if you can put a couple of spods out, but you don't know what other nuisance fish are in here.
Yep.
Anything else can be eating it.
Yep.
So you need to make sure that you constantly keep ringing that dinner bell
Right.
and have the worms falling through the water column. So, for instance, every hour I've just been putting 2 spods out.
Right.
You know, it's only 2 spods. However, you'll get that nice little trickle effect down to your spot, and you'll also maintain that there is something down there for when the carp do come in.
Right. And are you still putting corn out as well, or is it just pure worm?
No, it's definitely corn as well, because obviously as a hook bait presentation, I'm still using little tiny wafters tipped with a piece of corn.
Right.
So what I don't want to do is sort of alienate my hook baits.
Right.
So I'm probably putting 2 spombs of corn to every 6 spombs of chopped worm.
Right,
Just so there's something down there that looks like my hook bait. Because you know and I know with the, you know, if they're feeding on the worms, if there's corn about, they're not going to ignore it.
Yeah.
All
so
the worms.
you've effectively you've sparked a feeding response in the fish, and once they're feeding,
exactly.
they end up eating everything.
Yeah. And they won't be able to stop them. Then obviously your hook bait presentation doesn't look unnatural.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
That's the thought process anyway.
Yeah. Well, mate, let's hope it works, because you know, 10 out of 10 for effort. Yeah. If anybody deserved a couple of fish, it's you. But for now, I think.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Pleasure.
And let's eat this lovely steak.
Get in there. I'm so happy. Right, we've thrown absolutely everything at him, and you know, and the last night after a change of tactic, a move of swim, you know, it's just, you couldn't write it. It was 1:30 in the morning. To be fair, it hadn't happened for a while, so the receiver started to go, and for some reason I turned the receiver off, not even thinking, just shut up and let me go to sleep. And then when I clocked on what was happening, obviously, yeah, I'm absolutely over the moon. It was probably one of the fish that I wanted to get in the net the most over. I can't remember how I felt like that for a long, long time, you know. Nervous. People at home won't understand what's actually happened over the last couple of days, you know, the amount of effort to get that bite. You know, and it all makes it worthwhile when that fish finally goes in the net, you know. So I'm absolutely over the moon, you know. I can't take the smile off my face now, you know. It saved a blank, and now it's easier to turn 1 bite into 2 than it is to turn no bites into 1. So hopefully we'll catch another couple before first light.
To be brutally honest, I'm disappointed with what we've caught. You know, the guys at Linear have been very kind to us, giving us 4 prime swims. you know, which I know is, you know, locals can't get that sort of privilege, and I felt like we should have done better than we've done, you know, given that advantage. You know, we've had 4 swims between 2 of us as well, so we've had extra space. You know, one of the things on these lakes is what the guy does next door to you can have a major negative impact on your fishing, and we've not had to deal with that. So, you know, I'm really pleased that, you know, I've caught my first brasenose 30 and then followed it up with another one, and that was brilliant. And I'm really pleased that that the pure corn situation has worked, and I'm happy with how I've fished from an accuracy point of view. You know, I haven't done anything stupid. You know, and the lake is massively out of salt. You know, we haven't seen a single fish being played in the daytime at all. And there's probably 40 blokes here at the moment. So that gives you an idea of how the lake's fishing. We chose to come here because it's known for big hits. You know, there's 2,500 fish or whatever, as we said at the start, and you know, they have been really moody, and there have been odd bites around the lake at night, but you know, one guy's caught a couple, another guy's caught one, you know, but there's probably been 30 blanks while we've been here. So, you know, yes, we are in good swims, and that's definitely an advantage. You stick us in a corner, you know, with no fish there, me and Loz are not going to catch either, and you know, we're not saying that we're superhuman anglers at all, not by a long stretch, but you know, put us in front of the fish, and we can show you the techniques to catch them. And I think if I came back and you know, the fish were feeding and I've got on some fish with the tactics I'm using over 3 days, I'd expect 15 or 20 bites. And they certainly wouldn't all be at night as well. So, you know, I know the tactics are the ones to fish this particular venue, and I think the fish have just been out of salts. And you know, you look at Loz, you know, he's 20 years younger than me. He's like an absolute dynamo. He's up all day, all night, changing everything, and you know, it's exhausting just to watch him. And he's had one, you know, in all that time, and that's the worst he's ever done on here. You know, he came over here a week or so ago to practice over the bank holiday weekend. Every swim was taken, so 41 swims, and only 3 people caught, and he had 16 fish in 3 days. So, you know, doing the same as what he's doing now. So it just shows you, you know, what the lake has been like, and it's been, for him, it's been an unfair representation of his skill and the effort that he puts in, and I do feel for him in that respect. So, you know, I'm pleased that I've done okay under the circumstances. I'm pleased with how I've fished, but I really would have liked to have caught more. Yeah, man. There we go. I don't think anyone has worked harder for one carp, mate. I really don't. Fair play, 10 out of 10 for effort.
Cheers, mate.
What's your take on the situation? You know, why has it been so tough?
My take is it's nothing we're doing.
Right.
It's the fish, you know. You can see it from around the lake. You know, if like other people were catching, buzzers going off left, right and centre and we weren't, I'd be worried. But you can clearly see during the day the high pressure. You know, I think we had 5 or 6 degrees last night, so there's a massive contrast in weather.
Yeah.
And I just think it's putting them off, mate, to be honest with you. You know, we're getting the odd fish is coming out here and there. You've done really well considering the amont of bites around the lake.
I have to say, for an old timer, I'm quite pleased.
Right, yeah.
And I've been lucky. I've been lucky with the size of the fish as well, I think. Definitely getting tipped off about the pure corn has worked. There's no doubt about that. But you've got, like you said, you've got to put it into context. Yeah. We think there's probably been 3 or 4 other carp caught to the other 35 anglers that are around here over the time we've been here. So, you know, with a lake fishing as tough as this, any fish is a result, isn't it?
It just goes to show, doesn't it, that like we spent 2 days of literally throwing the kitchen sink at them, and it just goes to show if you're willing to persist, not let your head drop, try different things, and just keep positive and not be downbeat about it, you can still get results. You can still get even when it's tough. So yeah, I'm really pleased, mate.
Right. Well, mate, thank you for coming. Like I say, massive admiration for the amount of effort you've put in, and hopefully next time we'll go somewhere where the carp are actually eating, shall we? Yeah. Well, that's all we've got time for in this edition of Thinking Tackle. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the bank sometime.